we're going to go ahead and get rolling. By the way, these videos are probably going to take about 10 to 15 minutes each. So anyway, moving forward, we talked about anime and suicide and all that. But I want to get into Merton's strain theory. So basically, according to Merton, he said that there are two elements to any society, and ultimately we have what are considered cultural goals and aspirations. And that was typically, according to Merton, he basically viewed that as being, like monetary or materialistic aspects of society. So, whether it be having a nice home, having a good job with, good income. Those are examples of what he is actually looking at. Like I said, monetary or material side of things. And he pretty much viewed it as being more so, not completely based on socioeconomic advantages or disadvantages, but he definitely has that as a main component. So moving forward, like I said, there are cultural aspirations and goals and means to attain those goals or attain different aspirations we have. So what I mean by that is, moving forward here, you have, same set of goals as I just explained in a more materialistic, monetary ideology. Okay, but then everybody is a little different with the opportunities they have. And as it states on the screen, there are, it's not all about poverty, but it may be about, for instance, what kind of education do you have, or were you allowed to have? What kind of jobs do you have? What sort of opportunities are there? What sort of programs are available for you, for example? Those are all things that he's talking about. What sort of opportunities do people have? Some people, unfortunately, grow up in an environment where they don't have, they grew up in an area where the education system wasn't very good. Maybe they grew up in a family that didn't have a whole lot of, whether it be money or other resources. And maybe it was just an environment where it wasn't encouraged to go pursue some of those things. So that's along the same lines. That's what Merton's looking at. And a little bit, to expand upon that, Oscar Lewis went ahead and wrote a book, and there's a part of it that talks about the culture of poverty. And he basically points out three things that kind of lead up to this problem. In essence, what we view it as is, crime and deviant behavior. So he said basically what happens is someone who starts life and starts off to try to get these goals and aspirations that society has set forth for everybody, and they've exhausted their different resources within themselves, and then they don't know really where to turn. So if you let's just say someone is trying to get a job with the a police department. They've gone, you completed your degree here, you start to apply, and you're just not getting any response, as far as positive response that you want. You're not getting the job that you are actually applying for. And he's saying, well, at that point in time where people feel helpless, maybe they'll go another route to try to see, maybe instead of getting a job directly out of right out of finishing here at VU, you decide you're going to go work at a jail, or maybe as a dispatcher or something else within the criminal justice system. But that's another avenue. So you say an individual on their own feels like they're kind of helpless, or got to a point where they're helpless, and then the next step is, so you go ahead and maybe you try to make those changes, reach out to other people, reach out to other organizations. Okay. And lo and behold, you do that and nothing really comes of it. So instead of, at this point in time, you go from thinking that it's something that you need to do and maybe you can get help, to, well, you know what? Instead of taking responsibility for it, it's more like it's someone else's fault. It is, everybody, maybe it's because they don't like me, the person that I am, or it's their fault. They're a bunch of jerks. They're not going to hire me. I'm more qualified than everybody else. And it creates this, cynical feeling, which cynicism, by the way, is simply negative thoughts usually directed towards other people. And instead of accepting your own responsibility for not being hired, for instance, maybe you just don't have the work experience that they are looking for. Maybe you don't have the level of education they're requiring. So, for example, in Illinois, whenever I was applying with the Illinois State Police, they actually required a bachelor's. Now, did we have people who applied with less than a bachelor's? I'm sure they did, but they didn't make it because it was kind of like one of those things of, well, it's nice that you have either a high school diploma or an associate's. However, in the state of Illinois at that point in time, they said, but we are looking for bachelor's plus work experience and or military experience. So in that sense, like I said, cynicism or cynical thoughts, blaming the other people and the situation, not yourself. And then eventually what happens is you become apathetic, meaning you stop caring. So in life, when you come across things and you start to try them and you put forth effort and you go through these other steps and you communicate with other people and try to improve your chance of once again being hired by a particular agency. Maybe you want to go state police in Indiana, and so instead of going directly to them, I already mentioned earlier, working as dispatch or jail or something like that, and then you apply. Maybe you get to the point and you say, well, I don't even care anymore. I can't make it now, so I'm just going to, maybe you find a different job or stay in the one that you're at, which is, there's nothing necessarily wrong with it, but what we're talking about, or what Merton is talking about, is this idea that once you get to the point, or people get to the point where they don't care and they no longer want to hold on to those cultural aspirations, maybe they go ahead and are more likely to commit crimes or do deviant, get involved with deviant behavior and create problems. Another one might be resort to alcohol abuse or drug abuse, things like that. That's kind of where he's going with it. And unfortunately, I know of some individuals, one particular that comes to mind, that set his mind and his heart on becoming an officer in a particular agency, and went to school. Yeah, he had some jobs, but not a whole lot, like some jobs that were related to it. But ultimately, he applied one time and didn't get hired. So therefore, he held it against that agency, and basically everybody else who was involved with anything he did, he blamed it on them, instead of simply saying that, introspective approach and saying, okay, what could I do differently? Or the other side of it is, a lot of times you'll find out when you apply to these different places, many agencies basically set it up to where, whether it be by policy or by some state laws, that you have to, for instance, if there's a black female that retires, you replace that position with a black female. So maybe it's not necessarily what, whether you are good at what like you're a good candidate, it may not have anything to do with that. It's more so what their needs are. So take that into consideration. And in terms of, like I said, in terms of Merton and his idea, these people have already kind of said, well, I'm going to give up on doing what I know I should do, just simply because I've already made it through all this. And it's creating that culture of poverty, and they accept their idea of poverty like, well, I'm going to go ahead and continue living in this negative self-loathing mentality. Or even if they try to remain positive, they just simply say, well, it's usually tends to be a negative environment anyway. They talk about the culture of poverty. It tends to be negative. If I can't make it out, no one else can. And it breeds contentment, and it also breeds crime. So I want to go ahead and stop there for right now, just because it kind of gives you a good stopping point. And you guys can read on here. It says a mistrust of public institutions and police, which basically that's what it ends up becoming. They say, well, it's the government's fault, or in case of law enforcement, we usually are the ones that come in. And yes, for those people who are choosing to do illegal things in order to supplement any income, such as drug dealing, prostitution, or maybe that's their only way that they choose to make a living, and we arrest them, we are seen as the bad people because we only come in and arrest people that they know and don't seem like we are as interested in helping them as what we actually probably are. So anyway, I just wanted to get that across. And when we come back, I'll talk a little bit more about this aspect here of broken homes and education, how that impacts criminality as well, according to Merton. See you then.